I was ironing my navy blue dress when my son, Alex, called me on the morning of his wedding. "Mom, change of plans. I'm going to send an Uber to pick you up at 2 in the afternoon." I was confused. "But honey, didn't you say your car was in the shop and you were going to pick me up with mine?" He sighed on the other end of the line, as if I were a child asking silly questions. "It's just that Hope's mom arrived this morning and she doesn't have transportation. She's going to need your car to get to the venue. You understand, right? It's just more practical this way." My heart tightened, but I swallowed the lump in my throat and told him yes, I understood. After all, it was my only son's wedding. I should be happy, right? For 40 years, ever since my husband abandoned us, I was both mom and dad to Alex. I worked as a seamstress until my fingers went numb to pay for his education, so he could have a better life than mine. I sold my few pieces of jewelry for the down payment on the apartment he bought where he lives with Hope. When they decided to get married, I offered to pay for half of the party. It was $22,000 from my pension. They only consulted me on amounts and payment dates, but the important decisions about decorations, music, food, and even the day's logistics were made between Hope, Alex, and Carol, the bride's mother. I never imagined that on the most important day of my son's life, I would be treated like any other guest, sent in an Uber as if I were a burden. Meanwhile, the bride's mother, who has known Alex for barely 6 months since they got engaged, would arrive in my own car, looking all important. At 12 o'clock sharp, the Uber arrived, a simple car, with a driver who barely greeted me. I sat in the back seat, clutching my small purse with trembling hands, watching the streets I knew by heart through the window. I thought about all the Sundays Alex used to come to my house for dinner, how he always told me, "Mom, you're the most important person in my life." Had I imagined all of that? When we arrived at the entrance of the reception hall, I saw my car parked right out front, gleaming under the Sunday. From it emerged Hope and an elegant woman, laughing and chatting animatedly. It was her mom, Carol, wearing a very expensive dress and being received like a queen by the whole family. But what they didn't know was that everything was about to change. The ceremony was very beautiful, I can't deny it, but throughout it, I felt like a stranger in my own son's life. I sat in the third row, yes, the third, while Hope's family occupied the places of honor up front. Carol was radiant in the first row, next to the bride's father, receiving congratulations from everyone. I watched everything quietly, with a forced smile on my face, trying not to show the pain growing in my chest. For 6 months of preparations, ever since the engagement, Carol had always been polite but distant with me. In the few times we met, she treated me with the cold courtesy of someone fulfilling a protocol, always too busy for longer conversations, always in a hurry to leave. At the cocktail hour, I tried to approach Alex to congratulate him, but he was always surrounded by Hope's friends and family. Every time I got close, someone would pull him away for more photos, for more important conversations. I remembered when he was a little boy and had nightmares. I would spend entire nights awake by his bed, singing him lullabies my mother had taught me. I remembered the sacrifices I made to buy him school supplies, clothes, brand-name sneakers, because I didn't want him to be different from his classmates. I remembered the times I ate nothing but rice and beans so he could eat meat. And now, on his wedding day, I was an intruder in my own family. The religious ceremony took place at St. Joseph's Parish, a beautiful historic church in downtown Kansas City, where Alex had made his first communion. I had dreamed of this moment for years, imagining how I would walk my son down the aisle on my arm, how I would cry with emotion seeing my baby become a husband. But the reality was very different. Alex walked down the aisle on Carol's arm, who served as his sponsor, while I remained seated in my place, watching from afar as another woman shared that sacred moment with my son. Father Martinez, who had baptized Alex, saw me during the ceremony and smiled with that compassionate look that hurts more than any insult. It was the look of someone who understood that I had been relegated from the main role in my own son's life. During the exchange of rings, Hope dedicated a few words to Carol, thanking her for raising her with so much love and for giving her the example of what it means to be a strong woman. My eyes filled with tears, thinking of all the times Alex had come home crying because the kids at school made fun of him for not having a dad, and how I would dry his tears, telling him we didn't need anyone else, that the two of us were a complete team. But now, at his wedding, it seemed that team had dissolved long ago, and I hadn't even noticed. At the dinner, they placed me at a table in the back of the hall with some distant acquaintances. Carol had a table of honor next to the newlyweds. During the party, I watched as she danced the traditional first dance with Alex, while I waited for my turn that never came. It was then that I overheard a conversation between two guests behind me. Poor thing, the groom's mom. It must be hard being a single mother for so long. It's a good thing Carol can now give Hope the family support she needs. They spoke of me as if I were a weight that had finally been lifted from my son's shoulders, as if my role had ended, and now I could discreetly exit the stage. And in that moment, something inside me finally broke. The reception continued without anyone noticing my emotional absence. The band played Happy Birthday when they brought out the cake, and Alex called for a special toast to the two most important women in his life, Hope and Carol. The hall erupted in applause while I remained seated, feeling as if a lightning bolt had split me in two. The two most important women? Where did the 40 years I dedicated exclusively to him fit in? Where were the sleepless nights when he had a fever? The extra jobs I took to pay for his private school? The times I didn't buy medicine for myself so that he wouldn't lack for anything? Carol got up to give a speech that completely shattered me. She spoke of how she had welcomed Alex into her family like the son she never had, of how proud she was to have such a hard-working and responsible son-in-law, of how she hoped to be the grandmother their future grandchildren deserved. Every word was like a declaration that my place had been officially taken. People were crying with emotion, but my tears were from a deep wound I didn't know how to heal. When her speech ended, Alex stood up and hugged her, saying, "Thank you, Carol, for welcoming me like a son. I promise to take care of Hope the way you've taught me a woman should be cared for." After the cake, when the music changed to more modern beats, I sat there watching all the families dance together. Hope's parents danced with their daughter. Carol danced with Alex. But I remained alone at my table, invisible to everyone. One of Hope's aunts approached me and said, with all the good intention in the world, "Mrs. Miller, you must feel so at ease now that Alex has someone to look after him. You can finally rest after so many years of sacrifice." Her words, though well-intentioned, hit me like a ton of bricks. Rest? Was that what everyone thought? That I had been waiting for the moment to be free of the responsibility of being a mother. Around 11 at night, when the party was at its peak, I decided it was time for me to leave. I went over to Alex to say goodbye and wish him a good honeymoon. He was surrounded by friends, laughing and drinking, and when he saw me approach, his expression changed to a polite but distant smile. "Oh, Mom, you're leaving already? What a shame." I hugged him and told him it had been a beautiful wedding, that I was very happy for him. He gave me a few pats on the back, like you'd give a distant aunt, and said, "Thanks for everything, Ma. I'll call you when we get back from the trip." That was it. 40 years of sacrifice, unconditional love, and exclusive dedication summed up in thanks for everything and a promise of a call that I sensed wouldn't come soon. Carol also came over to say goodbye and surprised me with her sudden kindness. "Teresa, thank you so much for everything you did for the wedding. It's clear you raised Alex very well." It was the first time in 6 months she had spoken to me with genuine warmth, but it came too late. Hope hugged me and said she hoped we would continue to be family, but I could see in her eyes it was more courtesy than conviction. They both knew, just as I did, that my active role in Alex's life had officially ended that night. I called another Uber to take me home. The driver, an older man who reminded me of my father, noticed my sadness and asked if I was all right. "Yes, sir. I'm just tired," I lied. During the ride back, I watched the lights of Kansas City glitter in the night and thought about how ironic the situation was. I had spent 40 years working so my son could have a better life, and I had succeeded. He had a career, a good job, an apartment, a wife from a good family. But in the process, I had become obsolete, like a machine that fulfills its function and is then stored in a closet because it's no longer needed. I arrived home around midnight. It was a small but comfortable apartment that I had bought with my severance pay after working 30 years at the same textile factory. I took off the navy blue dress and put on my nightgown, but I couldn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen, drinking a cup of chamomile tea and processing everything that had happened. On the table were the receipts for all the payments I had made for the wedding, the venue, the food, the flowers, the music. $11,000 that I had gladly contributed because I thought it was an investment in my son's happiness. But now I realized I had paid for my own humiliation. I got up and went to my bedroom, where I had a box with all of Alex's photos since he was a baby. I looked at them one by one. His first day of school, his elementary school graduation, his first communion, his college graduation. In all the important photos of his life, I was there, smiling proudly by his side. But I realized something terrible. In the last 3 years, since he met Hope, I had been appearing less and less in his photos. First, it was the casual photos, then the family ones, and finally the official ones. Without realizing it, I had been gradually erased from his documented life. That night, lying in my bed staring at the ceiling, I made a decision that would change everything. I was no longer going to wait for my son to include me in his life out of pity or obligation. I was no longer going to beg for the affection I thought I deserved for my past sacrifices. If he had decided that my role as a mom was over, then I also had the right to decide what role I wanted to play from now on. I was 65 years old. I was healthy. I had a modest but sufficient pension, and for the first time in 4 decades, I didn't have to ask anyone's permission to make decisions about my own life. The next day was Monday, and Alex and Hope were leaving for their honeymoon in Jamaica. They planned to be away for 2 weeks, enough time for me to organize my thoughts and make the decisions I needed to make. I woke up earlier than usual, made myself a full breakfast, and sat down to make a list of everything I had to do. For the first time in months, I felt energized and purposeful. There was something liberating in knowing that I no longer had to live waiting for crumbs of attention and affection from someone who had clearly decided they no longer needed me. The first call I made was to the Valley Gardens ballroom, where the reception had been held. I needed to speak with Mr. Wallace, the owner, about a very important matter related to the payment. The second call was to my bank to review some transactions I needed to cancel. The third was to a lawyer my neighbor, Mrs. Davis, had recommended, who had gone through a similar situation with her children a few years ago. I had work to do, decisions to make, and a new life to build. At 65, Teresa Miller was about to discover who she was when no one else needed her. But what Alex and Carol didn't know was that during all those years of sacrifice and silent work, I had learned to be much smarter than they imagined. And what they would discover upon their return from their honeymoon would teach them that underestimating a 65-year-old American mother who finally decides to stand up for herself can be the most expensive mistake of their lives. On Tuesday morning, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. For the first time in months, I didn't have to worry about wedding preparations, appointments with vendors, or calls from Carol asking about payments. Alex and Hope were already in Jamaica, probably having breakfast by their all-inclusive hotel pool, without a single thought for the woman who had made it possible for them to afford that luxury. I brewed some coffee on the stove, the way my mother had taught me, sat in my small kitchen, and began to remember things I had buried deep in my memory. I remembered the day Alex turned 5. I worked at the textile factory from 6 in the morning until 6 in the evening, but that day I asked for permission to leave early because I had promised to take him for a slice of cake at Mr. Rodolfo's ice cream parlor. When I got home, I found him sitting on the front step, still in his kindergarten uniform, waiting for me with a patience that broke my heart. "You're here, Mom? Are we going for my cake now?" His face, lit up when he saw me, filled me with a happiness I haven't felt since. We walked hand in hand to the parlor, him jumping with excitement, me mentally calculating if I had enough money for the cake and that fortnight's rent. Mr. Rodolfo knew us well because we went there every time Alex behaved well in school, which was almost always because he was a very obedient child. "What'll it be today, Chief?" he asked my son, and Alex ordered an individual chocolate cake with 5 little candles. While we waited, he told me everything he had learned that day in kindergarten, that fish breathe through gills, that plants need water to grow, that his teacher's name was Miss Carmen, and that she had told him he was very smart. I listened to him with all the attention in the world, memorizing every word because I knew those moments were the only real treasures I had in life. When the cake arrived, Alex closed his little eyes tightly before blowing out the candles. "What did you wish for, honey?" I asked him. He looked at me with those big, bright eyes of his and said, "I wished that you would never leave, Mom. That it would always be just the two of us." Those words were etched in my memory forever. At that moment, I thought it was the most beautiful promise in the world. I never imagined that 35 years later, he would be the one to leave, the one to shut me out of his new life. After that wave of nostalgia, I got up to wash the breakfast dishes. As I scrubbed my coffee mug, I realized something I hadn't noticed before. I always washed 2 mugs, even if only I had had coffee. It was an unconscious habit I had developed over all those years. Alex came for breakfast on Sundays. Even when he no longer came regularly, I continued to wash 2 mugs, as if my body couldn't accept that the routine had changed. That morning, for the first time, I washed only 1 mug, and it hurt more than I expected. I sat in the living room and took out a photo album I hadn't opened in months. There was our whole story. Alex, newborn in my arms at General Hospital. His first day of school, clinging to my hand as if his life depended on it. His middle school graduation, where I was the only family member present because his father had decided he had more important things to do. There was one photo I loved very much. Alex at 12, helping me paint the apartment's living room. We were both covered in white paint, laughing like crazy because I had tried to paint the ceiling and the whole brush had fallen on me. That day we had decided to redecorate because Alex had said he wanted our home to be the prettiest in the building. I had saved for 3 months to buy the paint and new brushes. We worked all weekend, him with a patience and dedication that filled me with pride. When we finished, we sat on the newly vacuumed floor, eating ham sandwiches I had bought to celebrate. And he told me, "Mom, when I grow up and have my own house, I'm going to paint it just like this to remember you." That promise was also carried away by the wind. Further on in the album was his high school graduation photo. I had worked double shifts for months to be able to buy him a new suit and pay for his graduation party. In the photo, he looks very handsome in his cap and gown, and I'm by his side in a green dress that was the only elegant one I had. I remember that night, after the ceremony, we went to dinner at a restaurant I considered very fancy, although now I realize it was just a slightly upgraded diner. He ordered steak, and I ordered only soup because I couldn't afford 2 full meals, but I told him I wasn't hungry. During dinner, he told me his plans for college. He wanted to study business administration because he had heard that managers made good money. "Mom, when I finish my degree, I'm going to buy you a house with a garden, and you won't have to work so much anymore, I promise." I believed every word because he was my son, because I had raised him to be a man of his word, because I thought that unconditional love is always returned. That night we got home and he fell asleep in my arms on the couch while we watched a movie on TV. It was the last time he fell asleep in my arms. College came with new expenses and new sacrifices. I had gotten a part-time job on weekends cleaning offices to pay for his books and his bus fare. Alex studied from Monday to Friday and worked on Saturdays at a sporting goods store to help with his personal expenses. Sundays were our sacred day. He would arrive early for breakfast, tell me about his classes, his teachers, the friends he was making. I would cook his favorite meal, pot roast, and listen to every one of his stories as if they were the most important things in the world. It was during his sophomore year that he started to change. He would arrive later on Sundays, sometimes in a hurry because he had plans to meet with classmates to do homework. His stories were no longer just about classes, but about parties, about girls, about places where I didn't fit in. One Sunday he told me that he might not be able to come the next week because he had to go to a friend's family gathering. "But honey, Sundays are our days," I told him. He looked at me with a condescending smile I hadn't seen before and said, "Oh, Mom, I'm not a kid anymore. I have to have a social life too." That was the first crack, small, almost imperceptible, but the beginning of the end of our sacred Sundays. He started missing 1 out of every 3 Sundays, then 1 out of 2, until his visits became sporadic and always rushed. I continued to make pot roast on Sundays, just in case he showed up, and when he didn't, I ate it alone all week. It was the saddest meal in the world. Pot roast for 1 person at a table where there had always been 2. During his senior year of college, he met hope. The first time he told me about her was a Sunday. He did show up, but he was different, nervous, as if he had something important to say. "Mom, there's a girl I like a lot. Her name is Hope, and she's studying psychology. She's very smart, very pretty, and I think she's special." The way he told me, with that shy smile I hadn't seen on him since he was a teenager, filled me with tenderness. "And when am I going to meet her, honey?" I asked. He got nervous and told me, "Soon, Mom, when the time is right." The right time took 6 months to arrive. When he finally introduced her to me, I understood why he had waited so long. Hope came from an upper-middle-class family, with professional parents, their own house in a nice neighborhood, and a way of speaking that made it very clear she was not used to small apartments like mine. She was polite but distant, asking courteous questions but with no real interest in the answers. During the meal, I noticed how she discreetly looked around, cataloging every piece of furniture, every detail that made her feel uncomfortable. Alex behaved differently when he was with her. He used words I had never heard him use before. He talked about things I didn't understand. He laughed at jokes that didn't seem funny to me. It was as if he had put on a mask to impress her and, in the process, had hidden the son I knew. When they left that afternoon, I sat in the living room with a strange feeling in my stomach. For the first time in my life, I had felt that my own son was ashamed of me. The following months confirmed my fears. His visits became even more spaced out, and when he came, he was always alone. "Hope is very busy with her thesis," he would tell me, "or she has family plans." But I knew the truth. He had decided it was better to keep his two worlds separate. Hope's world, where he was a successful young professional with a promising future, and my world, where he was the son of a seamstress who lived in a small apartment and represented everything he wanted to leave behind. One afternoon, when they had been dating for a year and a half, Alex arrived with news. "Mom, Hope and I are getting married," he said with a huge smile, expecting me to jump for joy. And I did, because it was what was expected of me, because he was my son and his happiness was the most important thing. But inside, something broke when I realized I hadn't been the first to know. I found out after he had already proposed to her, after they had already talked to her parents, after they had already made plans that didn't include me. "And when are you planning to get married?" I asked, trying to sound excited. "In 6 months. We want it to be something intimate, just close family. Intimate." That word stuck with me because I understood it was his elegant way of telling me they didn't want a big wedding where I could invite my few friends, where my humble family traditions would be visible to her family. They wanted it controlled, elegant, appropriate for the standards of Carol and her husband. During the wedding preparations, I became a sort of invisible financial consultant. They would ask me how much I could contribute, on what dates, for which specific items, but never what I thought about the flowers, the music, the menu, or any detail that would make the celebration more personal. My suggestions were listened to with the condescending patience with which one listens to an older aunt who doesn't understand modern tastes. "Oh, Teresa, what a lovely idea," but we had already thought of something more, contemporary. Carol would tell me every time I proposed something. The week before the wedding, as I ironed my navy blue dress, the only one elegant enough for the occasion, I began to think about everything I had given for my son. Not just the money, which had been a lot considering my limitations, but the time, the energy, the personal dreams I had sacrificed. I never went back to school because I had to work to support him. I never remarried because no man wanted to take on another's child. I never traveled. I never saw the ocean. I never bought myself nice clothes. I never gave myself any luxuries because everything extra was always for him. And now, at 65, I found myself alone in my apartment, ironing a dress to go to my son's wedding as just another guest, while another woman occupied my place of honor. It hadn't been a conscious decision on my part to become invisible. It had been a gradual process, like when water evaporates without you noticing until the container is empty. Drop by drop, visit by visit, decision by decision. I had been erased from Alex's life until I became a secondary character in my own story of motherhood. That night, lying in my bed, I realized something that chilled my blood. I didn't know who Teresa Miller was without Alex. For 40 years, I had been Alex's mom, the lady who works to support her son, the woman who sacrifices for her family. But who was I as an individual person? What did I like to do when no one needed me? What were my dreams when I didn't have to use all my energy to make someone else's dreams come true? I got up and stood in front of the bathroom mirror. I saw a 65-year-old woman with graying hair that she always wore in a bun because it was more practical, with calloused hands from 40 years of work, with tired eyes but still full of life. "Who are you, Teresa?" I asked myself out loud. "What do you want for the rest of your life?" For the first time in decades, I didn't have an immediate answer. I had been so busy being the perfect mother that I had forgotten to be a complete woman. On Friday, 2 days before the wedding, Alex came to drop off some papers I needed to sign for the venue. He was nervous, excited, talking nonstop about the honeymoon, about the plans he and Hope had for the future. When we get back from the trip, Hope wants to start looking for a house, something bigger, in a better neighborhood. It's time to take the next step. I asked if they were going to continue living in Kansas City, and he said yes, that they had seen some houses in Overland Park, near where Hope's parents lived. "And what about me? How am I going to see you, if you live so far away?" I asked with all the innocence in the world. He was quiet for a moment, as if he hadn't considered that possibility. "Oh, Mom, we'll still see each other the same. It's just that now I won't be able to come over as often because I'll have more responsibilities. But you'll always be my mom." Those words sounded like a farewell, like when you tell a child their pet went to live on a farm where it will be very happy, knowing they'll never see it again. That night I called my sister Connie, who lives in Phoenix. We hadn't spoken in months because long-distance calls were expensive, and I always had more urgent expenses. I told her everything that had happened, from the wedding preparations to the conversation that afternoon. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she said something that resonated with me. "Teresa, you forgot to live your own life. You got so busy being the perfect mom that you never learned to just be Teresa." Her words hurt because they were true. Connie had made different decisions. She had remarried after her divorce. She had traveled. She had studied computer science at 50. She had built her own life that didn't completely depend on her children. "It's not too late to start," she told me. "You're 65, in good health, and you have a pension. Half the women your age are in your same situation. The difference is that some decide to stay, crying over what they've lost, and others decide to build something new with what they have left." On Saturday morning, the day before the wedding, I woke up with a strange clarity. I took a calm shower. I dressed in my most comfortable clothes and went for a walk around the neighborhood where I had lived for the last 20 years. I greeted Mr. Miguel, the man at the newsstand who always asked about Alex. I told him he was getting married the next day, and he congratulated me with genuine joy. "You must be so proud, Mrs. Miller. A professional son getting married in the church. Not everyone achieves that." I continued walking until I reached the park where I used to take Alex when he was a child. I sat on the same bench where I used to sit and watch him play on the swings, remembering how he would run to me every 5 minutes to tell me about some discovery. An ant carrying a crumb, a dog that looked like the one from the cartoon we watched on TV, a cloud that was shaped like an elephant. Back then, I was the center of his universe, the most important person, the one who had all the answers. Now, sitting on the same bench 20 years later, I realized it was time to let go. Not because I didn't love him, but because true love sometimes means giving complete freedom, even when that freedom doesn't include you. Alex had grown up, formed his own family, chosen his own path. My job as a mother was over, and it had been successful. He was an independent, hard-working man, capable of making his own decisions. The problem was that I hadn't learned to be successful at anything else, but that was about to change. Because if Alex had taught me anything over all those years, it was that people can reinvent themselves, can study new things, can change direction when life takes them down unexpected paths. And if he could do it at 28, I could do it at 65. The difference was that he had a mother who supported him unconditionally. I would have to learn to be my own mother. On Monday morning, after the wedding, I woke up at 5:30 as always, but this time it was different. I didn't wake up out of habit or obligation, but with a mental clarity I hadn't felt in years. I lay there for a few minutes, listening to the first sounds of the waking city, and made the most important decision of my life. I would no longer be the Teresa who waited for crumbs of affection. I would be the Teresa who decided what she deserved and what she was no longer willing to tolerate. I got up, showered calmly, and dressed in my best street clothes. Then I went to my desk, a small piece of furniture I had bought on an installment plan 10 years ago, where I kept all my important documents. I took out the blue folder where I had all the papers related to the wedding contracts, receipts, transfer confirmations, bank statements. For 6 months, I had been meticulously organizing every payment, every expense, every financial commitment I had made to make my son's dream a reality. The first document I reviewed was the contract with the Valley Gardens Ballroom. I had signed a very specific agreement to pay half of the total cost of the reception in 3 installments before the wedding, and the other half in 2 payments after the event. Mr. Wallace, the owner, had been very clear about the terms. Mrs. Miller, I understand it's a lot of money at once, which is why I'm offering this payment plan, but remember that the commitment is firm. The final $11,000 must be paid in full no later than 15 days after the wedding. I had already paid the first $11,000 religiously. Every 2 weeks since we signed the contract, I set aside a portion of my pension to meet my commitment. I had stopped buying meat to eat only twice a week instead of 3. I had canceled my cable subscription to save those $20 a month. I had stopped going to the private doctor to use only the public clinic, all so that Alex could have the wedding that Hope and Carol had dreamed of. But that morning, sitting at my desk with the documents spread out before me, I realized something fundamental. Nowhere in the contract did it say I was obligated to endure humiliation to fulfill the payments. There was no clause that said, Mrs. Teresa Miller agrees to pay this amount in exchange for being treated like a second-class citizen at her own son's event. The contract was financial, not emotional, and if the emotional conditions had changed so drastically, I had the right to reconsider the financial conditions. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for the Valley Gardens Ballroom. It was 8 in the morning, and I knew Mr. Wallace arrived early because he was a hard-working man. Good morning. This is Teresa Miller, the mother of the groom from last Saturday's wedding. Mr. Wallace's voice sounded friendly and familiar. Mrs. Miller, how are you? I hope you enjoyed the celebration very much. Everything turned out beautifully, if I may say so. I took a deep breath before continuing. Mr. Wallace, I'm calling because I need to talk to you about the outstanding payment. Of course, Mrs. Miller. We agreed that you would settle the remaining $11,000 this week, correct? There's no rush, but I would like to confirm the exact date for my records. His tone was professional but cordial, like someone used to dealing with families who are sometimes late with payments after weddings. Mr. Wallace, I'm afraid there has been a change in my situation. I will not be able to complete the payment. The silence on the other end of the line lasted for several seconds. I'm sorry, Mrs. Miller, could you repeat that? I don't think I heard you correctly. His voice now had a hint of concern. You heard correctly, Mr. Wallace. I have decided that I will not be paying the second half. Another silence. This one longer. Mrs. Miller, excuse me, but I don't understand. Have you had some financial trouble? Something unexpected? Because if that's the case, we can find a solution, work out a more extended payment plan. No, Mr. Wallace, it's not a financial problem. It's a problem of principles. I calmly explained everything that had happened. The Uber while Carol used my car, the table in the back of the hall, the treatment as a second-class guest at my own son's wedding. I paid the first half believing I would be treated as the mother of the groom, with the respect and dignity that deserved. But instead, I was treated like an inconvenient benefactor who had to be kept in the background. Mr. Wallace listened to my entire explanation without interrupting. When I finished, he sighed deeply. Mrs. Miller, I completely understand your situation. In my 30 years in this business, I've seen things that would break your heart. Families fighting over money, children mistreating their parents, mothers-in-law humiliating their daughters-in-law. But you have to understand that I also have commitments to meet. The vendors, the employees, the expenses have already been incurred. I understand, Mr. Wallace, and I'm truly sorry to put you in this situation, but I also hope you understand mine. I'm not breaking my word out of whim or malice. I'm defending my dignity after 40 years of sacrifices. Mr. Wallace was thoughtful for a moment before responding. You know what, Mrs. Miller? Your son is going to have to answer for this debt. The main contract is in his name as the groom. I will have to contact him directly. You are within your rights, Mr. Wallace. They are married adults now. It's time for them to take on their own responsibilities. I hung up the phone feeling strangely calm. I had crossed a point of no return, and instead of feeling anxious, I felt liberated. For the first time in decades, I had put my own feelings above the needs of others. The next call was to my bank. I needed to cancel the automatic monthly transfers I made to Alex's account. For 3 years, since he graduated from college, I had been transferring $500 every 2 weeks to help him with his apartment expenses. It was money I religiously set aside from my pension, even if it meant eating less meat or buying cheaper clothes. Good morning. I need to cancel a scheduled transfer, I told the bank executive when they finally answered. Of course, Mrs. Miller. What is the destination account number? I gave her the details, and she checked her system. I see you have scheduled transfers for $500 every 15 days to that account. Are you sure you want to cancel them? Completely sure. Perfect. The transfers are canceled as of this moment. Is there anything else I can help you with? Yes. I also need to cancel an additional card service. Alex had an additional card on my account for 5 years, originally for emergencies, but in recent months I had noticed small but frequent charges. Meals at restaurants, gasoline, purchases at the supermarket, nothing excessive but constant. It was as if he had assumed my money was a natural extension of his money. The additional card is also canceled. Mrs. Miller, would you like us to send a notification to the cardholder? That won't be necessary. He'll find out when he tries to use it. After the bank, I went to visit Patricia Morales, an attorney my neighbor Mrs. Davis had recommended. Her office was downtown, in an old but well-maintained building. The attorney was a woman in her 50s, with a serious but kind presence. Mrs. Miller, tell me exactly what's happening, she said after offering me a coffee and we sat in her office. I told her the whole story from the beginning. The 40 years of sacrifices, the wedding, the humiliating treatment, the decisions I had made that morning. She took occasional notes and asked me specific questions about dates, amounts, contracts. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and looked at me with an expression that was a mix of admiration and concern. Mrs. Miller, legally you are entirely within your rights to do what you have done. Voluntary transfers can be canceled at any time, and the venue contract clearly states that the obligation is shared with your son. What worries me, she continued, is that you must be prepared for the emotional and family consequences of these decisions. Your son is going to be very upset when he finds out. He will probably try to make you feel guilty. They might say you are overreacting or behaving irrationally. Her words reassured me because they confirmed that what I was doing was not a temporary madness, but a rational and justified decision. Ma'am, for 40 years I have lived worrying about my son's feelings. I have sacrificed my comfort, my money, my opportunities, everything to make him happy. And at his wedding, the most important day of his life, he didn't worry for a second about my feelings. Why do I have to keep being the only one who sacrifices? The attorney nodded with understanding. You are absolutely right, Mrs. Miller. I just want you to be prepared for what's coming. I left the attorney's office feeling more confident than ever. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being irrational. I wasn't overreacting. I was simply defending my dignity after years of taking it for granted. I walked through downtown Kansas City, watching people come and go with their own worries and their own lives. I stopped in front of a travel agency that had photographs of beautiful beaches in the window. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to imagine what it would feel like to be in a place like that, without having to worry about anyone but myself. I entered the agency more out of curiosity than any real intention of buying something. The girl at the counter, a kind young woman of about 25, greeted me with a smile. Good afternoon, how can I help you? I was just looking, I said shyly. Is there any particular destination you're interested in? She pointed to the photos in the window. We have very good deals for Florida and the Carolinas. They are perfect destinations for people who want to relax and enjoy. I liked that she didn't say people your age, although it was obvious that's what she had been about to say. How much would something like that cost? I asked. surprising myself by asking such a concrete question. Well, it depends on the season and the type of hotel, but we have packages starting from $3,000 for 3 days and 2 nights, including transportation and lodging. $3,000. It was exactly what I spent in a month buying the special food Alex liked when he came on Sundays. "Can I take some brochures?" I asked. "Of course. And if you like, leave me your contact information and I can let you know when we have special promotions." I gave her my name and phone number, feeling as if I were doing something forbidden but exciting. I left the agency with a bag full of colorful brochures, full of promises of freedom and adventure. That afternoon, sitting in my kitchen with a cup of tea and the brochures spread out on the table, I did something I hadn't done in years. I planned something just for myself. It wasn't just about the trip. It was about the idea that my time, my money, and my decisions belonged to me. That I could wake up one day and decide to go see the ocean without asking anyone's permission, without having to justify the expense, without having to worry if someone else was going to need me. In the evening, I called my sister Connie to tell her what I had done during the day. She was quiet when I explained about the venue contract, the canceled transfers, the visit to the lawyer. "Teresa," she finally said, "I'm proud of you. You don't know how long I've been waiting for you to make a decision like this." Her words filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. "Do you think I'm doing the right thing?" I asked, because a part of me still needed validation. "Teresa, I think you should have done this years ago. Alex is a grown man, with a job, with a wife. It's time he learns to live without his mom's emotional and financial subsidy. And it's time you learn to live for yourself." That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in months. On Tuesday morning, I woke up with renewed energy. I had more work to do. I reviewed all my monthly expenses and realized something surprising. Without the transfers to Alex, and without the extra expenses I made for his Sunday visits, my pension stretched much further than I thought. I even had a small margin for savings or to treat myself to some things I had been denying myself for years. I went to the supermarket and, for the first time in years, I bought only what I liked to eat. I chose expensive but delicious fruit. I bought a good piece of fish for dinner. I allowed myself to buy that Greek yogurt I always saw but never bought because it was more expensive than the regular kind. In the magazine section, I bought a travel magazine that had an article about women starting new adventures after 60. Each small purchase felt like an act of silent rebellion. That afternoon, I rearranged my apartment. I put all of Alex's photos in a box, not because I wanted to erase him from my life, but because I needed visual space to start imagining who Teresa was without being solely defined as Alex's mom. I moved the furniture to create a reading nook by the window. I took out books I had bought years ago but never had time to read because there was always something more urgent related to my son's needs. On Wednesday, I received the first call from Mr. Wallace. "Mrs. Miller, I've been trying to contact your son, but he's not answering. Could you give me an alternate number or tell me when he returns from his honeymoon?" I explained that he would be back the following Sunday and gave him Alex's work number. "Mr. Wallace, I want you to know that this isn't personal against you. You did an excellent job and the wedding was beautiful. This is between my son and me. I understand, Mrs. Miller, but you'll understand that I also have a business to run. I will have to take legal action if I don't receive payment when your son returns. You are within your rights, Mr. Wallace, and Alex is a responsible man. I'm sure you will come to an arrangement." It was strange to feel so calm talking about legal consequences that would affect my son, but for the first time in my life, his problems didn't automatically feel like my problems. On Thursday, I went to get my hair cut at a different salon than I usually went to. I always went to the same place, a cheap neighborhood salon where they cut my hair the same way for years. A practical cut, without style, designed for a woman who had no time or money for vanities. But that day, I went to a more expensive salon downtown, the kind of place Carol would go. "What did you have in mind?" the stylist asked me. A young woman with colorful hair who reminded me that beauty had no age limit. "I want something different," I said, "something that makes me feel refreshed." We spent an hour talking about styles, colors, possibilities. When she finished, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. I looked younger, more confident, more alive. On Friday, exactly 1 week after the wedding, I received a call from Hope. It was the first time I had spoken with her since the night of the celebration. "Mrs. Miller, how are you? Alex and I have been thinking a lot about you during the trip." Her voice sounded sweet, but nervous, as if she were reading from a script. "I'm very well, dear. I hope you're enjoying Jamaica." "Yes, it's beautiful." "Mrs. Miller, I wanted to ask, have you had any trouble with the gentleman from the venue? We got a strange message." "It's not a problem, Hope. It's just a situation that Alex will have to resolve when he gets back." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Could you explain a little more?" "We're worried. It's something between Alex and me, dear. Nothing you need to worry about on your honeymoon. You should enjoy these days that are so special." I hung up the phone feeling powerful. For the first time in my life, I had information that others needed. I was in control of a situation instead of just reacting to the decisions of others. It was a strange but intoxicating feeling. For 40 years, I had been the one waiting for news, the one depending on others' calls, the one living according to the plans and needs of my son. Now it was different. On Saturday night, as I prepared my dinner and settled down to read one of the books I had rescued, the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I had a feeling who it could be. "Mom? It's Alex. We're at the Kansas City airport. Can you explain what's going on with Mr. Wallace from the venue?" His voice sounded tense, worried, but also annoyed. "Welcome home, son. How was the trip?" My voice was completely calm, as if it were the most normal conversation in the world. "Mom, don't change the subject. Mr. Wallace called me 3 times telling me you owe him $11,000. What's going on?" "I don't owe him anything, Alex. He must be explaining the new situation to you." "What new situation? What are you talking about?" I could hear Hope in the background, asking him what was wrong. "Alex, I think it would be better if you came over tomorrow to talk calmly. You must be tired from the trip now." "No, Mom. I need you to explain to me right now what's happening. Mr. Wallace says if I don't pay him this week, he's going to sue me. Is this for real?" "It's very real, son. As real as the Uber you sent for me on your wedding day." There was a total silence on the other end of the line. What does the Uber have to do with this? His voice now sounded genuinely confused, as if he really didn't understand the connection. And in that moment, I realized something devastating. He really didn't know what he had done wrong. For him, sending me in an Uber while Carol used my car had been simply a practical decision, without any emotional weight. "We'll talk tomorrow, Alex. Get some rest now." I hung up the phone before he could respond. It was the first time in my life that I had ended a conversation with my son without making sure he was satisfied with the outcome. And it felt liberating. The next day, everything would change forever. On Sunday morning, I woke up feeling strangely serene. I knew that today everything would explode, that Alex would come looking for explanations, that there would be tears, accusations, maybe shouting, but for the first time in my life, I was in control of the situation. I wasn't the one who would have to explain or justify myself. I was the one who had made decisions and would now calmly wait for others to adapt to the consequences. I made myself a full breakfast, scrambled eggs and bacon, refried beans, strong black coffee, fresh fruit. Not because I was expecting visitors, but because I deserved to start this important day by nourishing myself well. While I ate, I listened to music on the radio, something I hadn't done in years because I always had the TV on, waiting for the news shows that Alex liked when he visited. It was James Taylor. Romantic songs that reminded me that I had once been a young woman with dreams that had nothing to do with being a mother. At 10 in the morning, the doorbell rang. I knew it was Alex because he had a specific way of knocking. 3 short rings, a pause, 2 long rings. It was a code we had invented when he was a teenager so I would know it was him and not be afraid to open the door. That code, which had once been a symbol of our bond, now felt like the announcement of an inevitable confrontation. I opened the door, and there was my son, but he looked different. He had dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept well, and that tense expression he got when he was genuinely worried. Behind him was Hope, nervous, clutching her purse as if it were a shield. "Good morning." I said with the same courtesy I would have shown any visitor. "Please, come in." "Mom, we need to talk urgently," Alex said without even greeting me properly. "What's going on with you? Why did you tell Mr. Wallace you're not going to pay him? Do you know the trouble you're putting me in?" His tone was one of frustration mixed with panic, like someone who discovers the rules of the game have changed without anyone telling them. "Sit down, please. Would you like some coffee?" I offered, remaining completely calm. It was strange how his agitation, instead of being contagious, made me feel more secure in my decisions. "We don't want coffee, Mom. We want to understand what's wrong with you. Mr. Wallace says you refused to pay your share, and now I'm responsible for the whole debt. It's $22,000. Where do you expect me to get that kind of money?" I sat in my favorite chair, the one by the window, and looked at them with the patience of someone who finally has all the truth on her side. "Alex, for 40 years I have paid everything I promised to pay and much more. This time, I decided that the deal was not fulfilled on your part because the deal was not fulfilled on mine." Hope looked at me, not understanding, as if I were speaking another language. "What deal? What are you talking about?" The confusion in Alex's voice was genuine, and that hurt me more than if he had been deliberately lying. It meant he truly hadn't considered my feelings as part of the equation. To him, I was simply a source of resources that didn't require special emotional care. The deal was that I would pay for half of your wedding in exchange for being treated as the mother of the groom with respect, with dignity, with the place of honor I deserved after 40 years of sacrifices. My voice remained calm, but each word was laden with decades of contained pain. Instead, you sent me in an Uber while my own car was used for Carol. You seated me in the third row while Hope's family occupied the front seats. You put me at a table in the back of the hall while Carol had a place at the head table. Alex was quiet for a moment, processing what I was telling him. Hope looked at him nervously, as if finally understanding the magnitude of what had happened. "But Mom," he finally said, "that was just logistics. It wasn't personal. We had to solve the transportation problem in the most practical way." His words confirmed my worst fears. He truly believed that humiliating me had been simply a logistical decision. "For you, it was logistics, Alex. For me, it was the confirmation that I no longer have a place in your life beyond being your financial sponsor." I got up and went to the kitchen to pour myself more coffee, more to have something to do with my hands than because I needed the caffeine. "For 6 months of preparations, you two consulted me about money and payment dates, but never about anything that would make the wedding more personal or meaningful for our family." When I returned to the living room, Hope had tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Miller, we didn't realize you felt that way. If we had known." Her voice broke a little, and I could see her regret was sincere, but I also realized that she, just like Alex, had automatically assumed my feelings didn't require special consideration. "Hope, dear, it's not your fault. You did what was natural. You prioritized your family, you made sure your mother had the place of honor, you focused on making the people who were important to you happy on your special day. The problem is that my own son didn't do the same for me." Alex looked genuinely devastated, but I was past the stage where his pain moved me to automatically comfort him. "Mom, if you had told me you were feeling bad, we would have changed things. It was never our intention to hurt you." His voice now had that repentant child tone that used to completely disarm me when he was little. But this time, instead of softening, my heart hardened a little more. "Alex, I shouldn't have had to tell you how to treat your mother with respect. That's something that should come naturally after everything we've been through together." I then told him about the canceled transfers, about the additional credit card that would no longer work, about all the silent subsidies I had been giving him for years without him even noticing. With each revelation, his face grew paler. $500 every 2 weeks? For 3 years? "Mom, I thought that was. I didn't know it was costing you so much." "Of course, you didn't know, honey, because you never asked. Because you assumed my money was a natural extension of your money, that my resources were automatically available for your needs." Hope was now crying openly, and Alex looked as if he had been physically struck. "Do you know what the saddest part of all this is? That for 40 years I sacrificed with pleasure because I thought I was building a special relationship with you. But at your wedding, I realized that to you, I'm just the housekeeper of your life. Those words were like a slap. Alex shot up from his chair, his eyes full of tears. "That's not true. You're my mom. You're the most important person in my life." But his voice sounded hollow, as if he himself doubted what he was saying. "If I'm so important, why did Carol dance the first dance with you and I didn't? Why did she give the speech about being the new grandmother to your children and I didn't get a chance to speak? Why, when you talk about the future, do you mention the new house near Hope's parents, but you never mention how you're going to include me in that new life?" The silence that followed was devastating. I could see in his eyes that he knew I was right, that he really hadn't considered my place in his future beyond being the grandmother who would babysit for free and the benefactor who would help out financially when needed. Hope was the first to speak. "Mrs. Miller, what can we do to fix this? How can we show you that we do want you in our lives?" Her question was sincere, but it came too late. "Hope, the damage is already done. It's not about proving anything now. It's about the fact that you both showed me, on the most important day of Alex's life, exactly where I stand in your priorities. And that place is not compatible with continuing to finance your life." I turned to Alex. "Honey, you have a job. You have a wife. You have an apartment. You are a successful adult man. It's time for you to live like one. But Mom, what if we need help? What if there's an emergency?" The question revealed everything. He had planned his adult life assuming I would continue to be his indefinite financial safety net. "Alex, emergencies are handled with insurance, with savings, with bank loans like any responsible adult does. They are no longer solved by calling Mom." Hope tried to mediate. "Mrs. Miller, I understand you're hurt, but don't you think you're being a bit drastic? I mean, cutting off all financial contact overnight." Her tone was soft, but it had a hint of manipulation, as if trying to make me feel guilty for defending my own boundaries. "Hope, I'm not cutting off contact. I'm establishing healthy boundaries. Alex can visit me whenever he wants. You can invite me to your family events. We can maintain a normal mother-son relationship, but no longer a relationship where I am his silent subsidy." Alex finally exploded. "But I just don't understand how you can be so cold, after everything we've been through together." "I love you, Mom." His words echoed in the apartment, but they no longer had the power to disarm me as they once did. "Alex, for 40 years, I loved you too. I loved you when I worked double shifts to pay for your private school. I loved you when I sold my jewelry to give you the down payment for your apartment. I loved you when I ate rice and beans so you could eat steak. But love can't just be one way. And when have I ever disrespected you?" His question was defensive, desperate. "You never yelled at me. You were never rude to me." "No, honey, you were never rude, but you made me invisible. You treated me like a piece of furniture that was always going to be there when you needed it, but didn't require any emotional upkeep. And at your wedding, that invisibility became official." Hope stood up and approached me. "Mrs. Miller, please, give us a chance to remedy this. We can have a family dinner. We can include you in our future plans. We can." "Hope, I no longer want to be included out of pity or guilt. For 40 years, I waited for my son to include me out of love. If that didn't happen naturally, it's not going to happen now by force." Alex sat down heavily in the armchair, his head in his hands. "I don't know what to say, Mom. I feel like anything I say will be wrong." For the first time since they arrived, his vulnerability moved me a little, but no longer enough to change my decision. "You don't have to say anything, honey. You just have to understand that actions have consequences, and that you can no longer assume that my resources and my time are automatically available for your needs." Hope asked what they were both thinking, and what's going to happen to us? To the family relationship? Her question was practical, but also vulnerable. "What's going to happen is whatever you decide happens. If you want a genuine relationship with me, where you treat me as a person and not just as a benefactor, I'm open to that. But if what you're looking for is a return to the old system, where I give and you receive, then we'd better leave things as they are." Alex lifted his head and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on him since he was a child, completely lost. "And the money for the venue? Are you really going to leave me with that debt?" His question confirmed what I had suspected. Until that moment, a part of him had hoped this was all a temporary tantrum and that in the end I would give in as I always had. "Alex, For 3 years you have been receiving $1,000 a month from my pension without wondering if I had enough for my own expenses. For 6 months, I saved $11,000 for the wedding by buying less food and canceling services I needed. If I could make those sacrifices to fulfill my part of the deal, you can find a way to come up with $11,000 to fulfill yours. But Mom, you know we don't have those savings. Then get a loan, sell something, ask Carol for help, get an extra job, do what any young couple does when they have unexpected expenses. But stop automatically making me your financial rescue plan. Hope went to Alex and put her hand on his shoulder. I could see in her eyes that she understood what was happening better than he did. Alex, maybe we should go. Give Mrs. Miller some time to think. And some time for us, too. It was an elegant exit, and I mentally thanked her for preventing the conversation from getting uglier. But Alex wasn't ready to leave. What if I tell you you're right? What if I acknowledge that I was wrong and I apologize? Would that change anything? His question had a genuine desperation that broke my heart a little, but it also had an unconscious manipulation. He believed the right words could erase years of wrong treatment. Alex, forgiveness is different from restoring the previous conditions. I can forgive you for hurting me, but that doesn't mean I'm going to put myself back in a position to be hurt in the same way. My answer left him silent for a long moment. He finally stood up and walked to the door. Let's go, Hope. I think Mom has made her decision. His tone had a coldness I had never heard him direct at me. It was the tone of someone who feels betrayed, who doesn't understand why the rules of the game had changed without his consent. Alex, I said before he left, my door will always be open for you, but it's going to be a two-way door. No longer just an entrance for taking, but also an exit for giving. They left without a proper goodbye. Hope looked at me one last time, with an expression that was a mix of respect and sadness, as if she had finally understood something about motherhood she hadn't considered before. When I closed the door behind them, I stood in the hallway for several minutes, processing what had just happened. I didn't feel victorious, but I didn't feel defeated either. I felt free. For the first time in 40 years, I had placed my own emotional needs on the same level as my son's. I hadn't been cruel or vengeful, but I had been firm. I had established boundaries that I should have established years ago. That night, as I ate dinner alone in my kitchen, I received a text message from Alex. Mom, I'm so sorry I hurt you. It wasn't my intention. I love you and I want to fix this. It was the kind of message that before would have made me call him immediately to tell him everything was okay, that I forgave him, that we could go back to how things were. But this time, I just replied, I love you too, son. When you're ready for an adult relationship, I'll be here. There was no reply that night, nor the next, nor the week after. And for the first time in my life, my son's silence didn't make me desperate, because I had finally learned that true love sometimes requires letting go, requires allowing people to face the consequences of their decisions, requires being strong when maternal instinct screams to give in. 3 weeks later, as I watered the plants on my apartment terrace, I saw my reflection in the window. It was the reflection of a woman who had regained her dignity, who had learned to value herself, who had discovered she could be happy without being needed. It was the reflection of Teresa Miller, not just Alex's mom. And for the first time in decades, I liked what I saw. 6 months after the wedding, I'm sitting on the terrace of a small house I rented 5 blocks from a lake in Asheville. Every morning I wake up to the sound of fishermen preparing their boats and the singing of mockingbirds nesting in the bougainvillea tree in my garden. It's a simple life, but it's completely mine. For the first time in decades, nobody needs anything from me. Nobody treats me like a burden. Nobody leaves me out of important moments. I have a quiet routine. I wake up early. I take care of the plants I planted in my small vegetable garden. I write letters to my sister Connie, who now visits me every 2 months. And in the afternoons, I sit here on the terrace, watching the town's movement and the golden sunsets over the water. Moving to Asheville hadn't been an impulsive decision. After the confrontation with Alex, I spent a month thinking about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. One day, while browsing the travel brochures I had saved, I saw an ad for houses for rent in towns near Kansas City. "Live the tranquility you deserve," the ad said, and those words resonated deeply with me. I called the number, and a week later I was driving to Asheville on a bus with a small suitcase and a heart full of hope. The house I found was perfect for one person. 2 small bedrooms, a kitchen with a window to the garden, a cozy living room, and this terrace where I now spend most of my afternoons. The town is quiet, but not boring. There's a market on Wednesdays and Saturdays where I buy fresh vegetables and flowers for the house. There's a small library where I became a member, and where I discovered my love for romance novels that I never had time to read. There's an old church where I go on Sundays, not just for faith, but because I like the feeling of silent community that is created when people gather without the need for words. What I like most about living here is the elegant invisibility I have. Nobody knows me as Alex's mom, or as the woman who worked 40 years to support her son. Here I am, simply Teresa, the lady who rents the blue house near the lake, who buys flowers on Saturdays, who greets kindly but maintains her privacy. It's liberating to be a benevolent mystery to others, instead of an open book that everyone thinks they have the right to read. During these months, I've developed small routines that give me structure without being overwhelming. On Mondays, I do laundry and clean the house thoroughly, playing James Taylor music that reminds me of my youth. On Tuesdays, I go to the market and then cook something special, just for myself, things I like but never prepared because Alex didn't like them. Fish with garlic butter, stuffed peppers out of season, salads with expensive ingredients. On Wednesdays, I read in the garden, under the shade of the ash tree that's full of nests. On Thursdays, I write long letters to Connie telling her about my new life, and she responds with stories from Phoenix that make me laugh. Fridays are my adventure day. I take the bus to Kansas City and spend the day walking through places I knew but had never really enjoyed because I was always in a hurry to get home to prepare food or wash Alex's clothes. I visit museums, sit in cafes watching people, buy used books in the downtown bookstores. It's amazing how a city can look completely different when you walk through it without obligations, without schedules imposed by the needs of others. Saturdays are for the garden. I've discovered I have a green thumb, something I never knew because in the Kansas City apartment I didn't have space for more than a few small pots. Here I have tomatoes, peppers, aromatic herbs, and a small rose bush that is beginning to produce beautiful red flowers. Working with the earth gives me a satisfaction I didn't know existed. It's as if every seed I plant is an investment in my own future, a promise that I will be here to see what I plant grow. Sundays are my days of complete silence. I don't play music, I don't turn on the television, I don't talk on the phone, I just enjoy the silence I chose to have. I sit on the terrace with a cup of coffee and watch the lake change color, according to the hours of the day. In the morning it's silver, at noon deep blue, in the afternoon golden, and at dusk it turns purple like a beautiful wound. In those moments of absolute silence, I realize how much noise there was in my previous life. Not just the noise of sounds, but emotional noise. The noise of constant worries for others. The noise of guilt and responsibilities that were not mine. 3 months ago, I received a call from Hope. My phone rang on a Wednesday afternoon while I was watering the plants in the garden. I saw her name on the screen, and my first impulse was not to answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Mrs. Miller, how are you? Her voice sounded different, more mature, as if she had been through something difficult. I'm fine, dear. How are you two? We're learning. Alex and I have had to make a lot of adjustments. She told me they had to get a loan from the bank to pay the debt for the venue, that Alex had taken a part-time job on weekends to generate extra income, that they had to cancel their plans to buy a new house because their finances were tighter than they had calculated. It's been hard, she said, but also educational. Alex has realized a lot of things he didn't see before. And how are you, Hope? I asked, because her voice had something that worried me. I'm fine, Mrs. Miller. I'm 3 months pregnant. The news hit me like a lightning bolt. I was going to be a grandmother. For 40 years, I had dreamed of this moment. I had imagined what it would be like to hold my son's first child, how I would spoil them on weekends, how I would teach them the songs I used to sing to Alex when he was little. Congratulations, dear. I'm so happy for you. The words came out automatically, but inside, a storm of contradictory emotions was unleashed. Genuine joy for the new life to come. sadness knowing that I probably wouldn't have an important place in that baby's life, relief at not having to bear the responsibility of being the full-time, unpaid grandmother they had probably planned for me to be. Mrs. Miller, Hope continued. Alex and I have been talking a lot these months. About you, about what happened, about how we want to raise our child. And we'd like to invite you to dinner to talk. Her invitation sounded sincere, but also desperate. That's very kind of you, Hope, but I think it's too soon for that. Please, Mrs. Miller. I know Alex made mistakes. I know we hurt you, but we're trying to be different. And we want you to meet your grandchild when they're born. We want you to be a part of their life. Her words moved me, but not enough to change my position. Hope, when you're ready for a genuine relationship with me, without hidden agendas, without desperate needs on my part, then we can talk. After that call, I sat on the terrace until very late, processing what it meant to be a grandmother under these circumstances. It was strange to feel that I could love someone who hadn't been born, yet maintain firm boundaries with that person's parents. That night, I wrote a long letter to Connie, telling her about the pregnancy and my confused feelings about it. Her reply arrived 2 weeks later. Teresa, you're going to be a magnificent grandmother when the time is right, but you're right not to let yourself be emotionally manipulated by the baby news. A month later, I received another call, this time directly from Alex. It was a Saturday morning, and I was having breakfast on the terrace, enjoying the fresh lake air. Mom, can we talk? His voice sounded different, less demanding, more humble. Of course, honey. Tell me what you need. I don't need anything, Mom. I just wanted to ask how you are, if you're okay. It was a strange conversation because he really seemed to be asking without ulterior motives. He told me about his extra job, about how he was learning to manage the family budget without my subsidy, about how difficult but rewarding it had been to realize that he could solve financial problems without automatically calling me. I've been thinking a lot about what you told me, Mom, about treating you like the housekeeper of my life, and you're right. I'm so sorry. I believe you, Alex, and I thank you for telling me. My response was warm but cautious. I had learned that apologies, however sincere, did not guarantee lasting changes. How's your new house? I asked, changing the subject slightly. It's fine, Mom. It's small but comfortable. Asheville is a beautiful place. Hope says she'd like to visit you someday, just to see where you live. When the time is right, I replied, using the same words I had used with Hope. Yeah, Mom, when the time is right. There was a long pause before he continued. Mom, do you miss me? The question was vulnerable, genuine, loaded with the insecurity of a child who isn't sure if he's still loved. Of course I miss you, Alex. You're my son. That will never change. But I'm also learning that missing someone doesn't mean I have to live my life for that person. My answer left him quiet for a moment. And the baby? Are you excited to be a grandmother? Very much, honey. But I'm also at peace with the idea of being a grandmother with healthy boundaries. That conversation marked a subtle but important change. Alex started calling me once a week, always asking how I was, without asking for anything in return. He would tell me about Hope's pregnancy, about his jobs, about the things he was learning about being an adult without a family financial safety net. I would tell him about my life in Asheville, about my plants, about the books I was reading. They were real conversations between two adults, not between a provider mother and a needy son. During these months, I've also made new friends. Mrs. Davis, my 68-year-old neighbor, has been a widow for 10 years and has a life philosophy that inspires me. Teresa, after 60, every day we live without family drama is a gift we give ourselves. We go to the market together on Saturdays and tell each other stories of our past lives while we choose vegetables. Mr. Robert, the man who sells flowers at the market, has taught me about different types of plants and gives me cuttings for my garden. He's a widower too, 72, and has a very beautiful way of looking at life. Mrs. Miller, the strongest plants are the ones that learn to live alone before sharing soil with others. There's no romance between us, just a comfortable friendship based on conversations about gardening and shared silences that don't need to be filled. Miss Isabel, the librarian who is only 30 but has an impressive wisdom, has introduced me to authors I had never considered reading. Thanks to her, I discovered that I like biographies of women who changed their lives after 50. Each book teaches me something new about the possibilities that exist when a woman decides to prioritize herself. A month ago, while reading in the garden, a letter arrived from Kansas City. It had no return address, but I recognized Alex's handwriting immediately. Inside was an ultrasound photo and a short note. "Mom, it's a girl. We're going to name her Teresa, after you. We hope that when she's ready to meet you, you can teach her to be as strong as her grandmother." The note asked for nothing, promised nothing. It just shared information and expressed a wish. That ultrasound photo is now on my refrigerator, next to Connie's letters and photos of my plants. Every time I see it, I feel a strange mix of excitement and tranquility. Excitement for the new life to come, for the possibility of being part of my granddaughter's life, for the opportunity to break the dysfunctional patterns that were repeated between Alex and me. Tranquility, because I know this time it will be different. It will be a relationship where I can give love without sacrificing my dignity, where I can be a grandmother without becoming an unpaid domestic servant. This morning, while watering the plants in the garden, I received a call from Hope, Mrs. Miller. She was born yesterday. Teresa Hope. She's healthy and beautiful. Her voice was full of the exhausted emotion of a new mother. "Congratulations, dear. How are you?" "Tired, but happy." "Mrs. Miller, I'm not calling to pressure you or ask for anything. I just wanted you to know that your granddaughter is here. Thank you for calling me, Hope. Give my congratulations to Alex." There was a pause before she continued. "Mrs. Miller, you know what? These months have taught me a lot about what it means to be a mother. And now I understand better why you made the decisions you did. I understand that defending your children sometimes means teaching them boundaries." Her words touched me deeply because they came from someone who now had the responsibility of raising a new Teresa. Hope, being a mother is the hardest job in the world because you have to love unconditionally, but you also have to teach responsibility. And sometimes those two things seem contradictory. "Yes, Mrs. Miller, I understand that now." After hanging up, I sat on my terrace, thinking about the beautiful irony of the situation. My granddaughter is named Teresa, and although I haven't met her yet, I already know that I will love her deeply. But I also know that I will love her in a different way than I loved Alex. I will love her without sacrificing my own identity, without forgetting my own needs, without turning my love into a chain that binds us both to dysfunctional patterns. A week ago, as I was walking along the lake shore, I saw my reflection in the water and had a profound revelation. For 40 years, I had defined my worth as a woman based on how necessary I was to others. But here, in Asheville, I have learned that my real worth lies in how at peace I am with myself, how authentic I can be without apologizing, how happy I can be without needing the constant validation of others. This evening, as the sun sets over the lake and the fishermen return with their full nets, I feel completely at peace with the decisions I made. They were not easy decisions. They were not decisions that made me popular within my family, but they were the right decisions for my emotional well-being and my dignity as a person. Sometimes, I receive text messages from Alex with photos of the baby. They are simple messages, without pressure, just sharing moments. "Mom, look at the face she makes when she sleeps. She looks like you when you frown. I think she's going to be as stubborn as her grandmother." I respond with affection, but I maintain my boundaries. "She's beautiful. I'm so glad she's growing well. Give her my blessings." I haven't seen my granddaughter in person yet, and it will probably be several months before that happens, but I no longer live in the desperation of being included at any cost. I have learned that waiting for the right moment is better than forcing wrong situations. When the day comes to meet Teresa Hope, it will be because her family truly wants to include me in a healthy way, not because they need me as a financial lifeline or a free nanny. For the first time in my life, I'm not waiting for others to change so I can be happy. I am happy with the life I have built for myself, with the decisions I have made, with the woman I have become. If Alex and Hope decide to genuinely include me in their lives, it will be a beautiful gift. If not, I will continue to be happy with the life I have. As I write these lines, sitting on my terrace with the lake shining under the stars, I realize that I finally understand something fundamental. True love is not sacrificing yourself until you disappear for others. True love is staying whole and authentic while you love. It is setting healthy boundaries. It is teaching by example that every person has the right to their own dignity. At 65, Teresa Miller finally learned to live for herself without guilt, to love without disappearing, to be a mother without ceasing to be a woman. And she discovered that the silence she chose to keep was not empty. It was full of peace, of possibilities, of a happiness that depended on no one but herself. We are curious to know how far this story reached. Where are you watching from? Comment below.